In Main Street, old Colorado City, frontier town, they are not as worried about the digital divide and the massive challenge of the communications revolution as the G8 nations. They will meet for the World Economic Summit in Genoa this July to discuss the digital opportunities versus the digital divide. On March the 1st, 2001, I traveled to Colorado City to meet Dave Hughes, a pioneer of broadband wireless internet. Dave used the internet and the PC to realize his vision for the regeneration of old Colorado City with its 96 small businesses, not one of which has a corporate headquarters outside of Colorado City. Communications technologies were Dave's secret weapon in his fight to regenerate this and other communities across the United States. I was guest of honor at Dave's St. David's Day dinner party. Dave told me and his family of his wireless vision for Wales, sustainable communities, as well as a real producer of value to the world at large. Today, as an ISP, Dave offers the small businesses and residents of his neighborhood broadband internet at low cost.
All right, well, this is the engine room of Old Colorado City Communications. This is our servers, hubs, very standard, National Science Foundation hubs, dial-in modems. So there are people online right now. But this is Ethernet going in other parts of the building. That's at Jim Spear's place. Jim Spear's business is typical of a small business. He's a web designer, occupying this funky space because he likes it, and then he's connected with his powerful machines, wired to our premises, and then from there wirelessly downtown. And so consequently, he was able, in the early part of this, to take advantage of the favorable economics because he would have been paying $1,200 a month if he had done this individually through Quest, which is the same as British Telecom. So what do you say about it?
It's been fantastic. Absolutely a tremendous asset, a great resource. It's a shame that more people can't take advantage of wireless.
No.
I mean, the flexibility of it and it's enormously helpful.
And back here, all these businesses are linked to the outside world. This is the actual link running right this second up to the antennas on the roof, going downtown through a relay, going into Quest, and so consequently, like the small town in Wales, there would be an internet service provider somewhere, and this radio would be the link upstream, while from other radios could be downstream to the customer. And then here's something unusual. If you step around here, what you're hearing in the background is classical music station in Colorado Springs broadcasting wirelessly, in their matter, going into this Real Audio web server, which goes to the Linux server, which goes Ethernet out to my radio, so anyone in the world over the internet can literally listen to KCME classical music. But this is not a wired high-cost connection downtown. So KCME, a non-profit radio station, is able to afford my small fee for being connected to the worldwide internet, feeding their material. Here is a business out of Texas that is using me as a hosting service. This is his system. He does with it what he wants. He can come into it any time. But the main point is my fee to him is much lower than if he was in a big central hosting service. That's the point of that. Now, what you're seeing here are all the kinds of different wireless devices and radios that I work with. This is one of the latest ones, Nokia, out of Finland, spread spectrum, 10 megabits per second, 802.11 standards, which can interconnect to this lower cost Teletronics radio, which is basically a cheaper one, but this is 2 megabits per second, wireless, no license. This is the same frequencies that are permissible for certain uses in the UK, including Wales. I'm quite aware of that. I've checked into it. Then over here is one of the more powerful radios. This is a Aeronet, and while this base radio gets into the neighborhood of $2,000, this can talk to over 1,000 other radios at 10 megabits per second, and is such a successful company with a successful radio, it has been bought out by Cisco. So this is in fact a Cisco radio, and technical people around the world understand that Cisco is one of the biggest and most powerful communications networking equipment company. Now, I do work for the National Science Foundation, and I am showing them how to connect up their data loggers that are hooked to sensors in remote areas, because hitherto things like this data logger would be sitting out in the jungles of Puerto Rico or in Alaskan wilderness with a memory module with it hooked to sensors. But the way customarily you would have to get it is come out and physically take this back. And in severe climates and remote areas, that was very difficult. So I am pioneering for the National Science Foundation how to do this wirelessly. And we use a variety of radios. These are BreezeComs, BreezeNets, out of Israel, 3 megabits per second. This is an Aeronet single MAC address radio, 10 megabits per second. This is a 2 megabit per second PC card that slides into a PC slot, or for another $40, and we're talking $100, you can slide this in, and suddenly you have a one that can fit into your slot in your computer, and out the back is the little antenna, which can go to a larger antenna, which can get range which it could not from the small one. So this is the kind of thing that can be in the individual home, the small business, a small radio, 2 megabits per second. That's above T1 speed. And I defy anybody to provide you a free connection at 2 megabits per second in any other way. There is an internet satellite that comes in here, into here. Right now, it's connected to this and to a server. But the fact is, I could, if I chose to do it, I could turn around and hook up a series of small radios out to the middle range, 3-4 miles, and so only one cost of maybe $1,500 a month to the internet service provider, who then goes out wirelessly to the clients. And if there's 10 people connected to it, that means $150 a month. You know, if there's 25, it suddenly drops down below what DSL would charge. But this will work as a model in places where you cannot terrestrially connect up, places that are in valleys or spots that is so remote that only a satellite can reach it. So the model is satellite here going outward, wireless here, satellite service there. That's a very powerful model because satellites are getting better, faster, and cheaper at the internet. It even opens the door to neighborhood ad hoc networks. One man gets the thing on his house and prevails on his neighbors to share the cost, and it's a co-op in the neighborhood, reaching maybe 10 houses, and therefore 1/10 the cost of the single one. So the combination of the wireless plus the satellites plus the long-ranger ones, 10 miles, plus the short-range ones, 1/4 mile down into the building, that's the winner. And there's over 80 companies making these, and of course the antennas, if you look over here, range from these types of dishes to flat plates. In fact, if you're worried about the aesthetics, this can be on the wall, and you can put a painting on here, and nobody would know the difference. This is showing the strength of the signal, the quality of the signal of a totally unconnected wirelessly, and it is high speed enough that if you then jump over here and run Internet Explorer, I would be able now to connect it up. Matter of fact, this is going to that out to San Diego back through the back through a satellite. But let me go to something like the www Yahoo, which gives you an idea. And that's how fast it's coming up. And I defy you to have that speed with a dial-up modem in North Wales, because this is going 10 megabits per second, which is 7 T1s. Each T1 is 24. It's about 140 times faster than a dial-up modem. It's about 140 times faster than a dial-up modem. And from here to there, it's free. From there downtown, it's free. The cash register doesn't start ringing until it gets into the upstream, which in your case might be British Telecom, might be the cable internet, might be one of the heavy carriers. So this suddenly opens the door from communities. I think I favor pubs in here because I did the first ones in a place called Rogers Bar, where that could become the internet service provider, the community center, or it could be the church or the chapel. It could be a university, or it could be a rugby club. And then outward to the limits of the radios, which can be up to about 10 miles. And I know Wales laid out completely because I've been there, I've measured the distances, and most of those small communities in Wales, the farms are within 5 to 7 or 8 miles of their trade area. And so it's actually possible to consider a pub to be an internet service provider with the additional thing of a cyber cafe for people that don't have computers, but it's all wireless across all of rural Wales with individual, interconnectable, standard devices. Pretty powerful. One of the things that's not obvious is that it's not just consuming information. That's what broadcast television, broadcast radio is, generally one way. And so if you can reach that in a remote area, like the symphonies and so on, that's on the net. But the far more significant thing is that what have been hitherto called consumers become producers. The economics is so favorable for this that it's possible to take a very low-cost PC, put Linux in it, a open standards software, $30, $40, hook it up wirelessly to its website, and anyone can run their own website, which the rest of the world comes into. And that can be for educational purposes, historical purposes. It can also be for business purposes. That is a fundamental shift in e-commerce from the notion that all consumers, all people in the rural areas are simply consumers, and they may produce their sheep, they may produce their slate, they may produce their products, but then they have to market it, then they have to ship it, and this opens the door to people being able to be programmers, artists, creators, writers, Welsh educators, multimedia, and they can be in the smallest, most remote corner of Wales. There is no free lunch here. Governments control spectrum. The United States government, through the Federal Communications Service, owns spectrum. They license it. They allocate it. The British are no different. UK has its own spectrum policies. But licenses are auctioned, they go to the big boys, not to the small ones. And so in public policy, you have to think about the fact that the wireless I'm showing you, which is no license here and it's no license in UK, there are forces, there are people, there are agencies who either don't understand it and think that all good things, multimedia, come from large entities, and they win the auction. So they dominate the airways, they dominate the spectrum. That if this is to be a beneficiary to all the rural Welsh, and I'm assuming that probably 1 million of the 2.5 million Welsh are rural, which have a hard time getting bandwidth, there has to be a recognition at the highest policy levels that it is in the public interest to encourage, to make available the spectrum so that the manufacturers can make radios that take advantage of the spectrum, sharing the spectrum. That's what's new on the face of the earth. It's not slices of spectrum that if you own it, I can't. All the radios I use in here are shared. Other people can be using the same radios in the same space up to some very high mathematical limits. And so if these radios are to reach the most remote area, the public policy at the UK level, at the ministerial level, at the Welsh Assembly level, has to take into account that you are balancing the commercial licensing of spectrum to a handful of people with the open, free, where the individual, the small internet service provider, all they have to do is buy the radios. But they are permitted by government to use that spectrum, but so can everybody else. And it's not either the big systems with licensed or the small systems with free spectrum. It is a healthy mix which matches individuals, small businesses, small organizations, churches, schools, the nonprofit sector. But there seems to be a nervousness in all countries. Oh, wow, I mean, should we really let the little person use this spectrum? Won't they tie up at all? My answer is yes, right down to high school kids who in small towns using this spectrum can afford to put up a system, can afford to link it to the ISP, and having done so, develop their own skills. So the downside is that to take advantage of it, there has to be as much thought put into spectrum allocation over time as there is into encouraging the manufacture and the distribution of these radios, which can cost very low. High bandwidth, free between the 2 points of the radios.